So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me. simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Folks, we have hopefully a very good show for you this week. I hope you enjoy all of them, actually. We're going to talk about a couple of different subjects, but I think these are important, and they're certainly timely. And regardless of whether you're into UFOs or paranormal or not, whether you're a Christian or an atheist or a Jew or a Muslim or whatever you want to call yourself, I think these are subjects that are of universal interest. And the bottom line remains that if we as a species, as the human race, does not get behind some of this stuff, let's be honest, our future is not going to be bright, and we're going to eventually be doomed as a species, and that, of course, is unacceptable, especially if we can avoid it. You know, one of the things that makes human beings unique from all other life forms is that we really can, to a huge degree, more than any other life form, think about this for a moment, we can control our destiny. For example, we can destroy ourselves in minutes. We just have to launch nuclear weapons. We've got over 25,000 of them around the world, and we don't need that many to destroy and wipe out our planet. If we were to do that, we would not exist. A lot of life would not exist, but there would still be life on this planet that would continue to thrive. Things like microbes and cockroaches and things like that. They probably would survive or mutate or whatever, but human beings would be gone. They'd be vaporized. They'd be dead. And so would a lot of other life forms. The planet would be effectively destroyed as we know it today. So we have the ability to destroy ourselves, or we have the ability to help ourselves achieve things that today we can only dream of. And you must look at the concept that if you have the gift, the blessing, the power to do either destructive things that can wipe out and eliminate something, including yourself, or you have the ability to do only positive things and push the human race forwards and do what Steve Jobs famously said, put a dent in the universe in a positive way, we owe it to our children, our existence, the fact that we have this blessing, this capability to do the right thing. When we make a point to continue to do the wrong things, that's inexcusable. There are no excuses, but people who continue to make a point to do the wrong things, politicians, for example, they're full of excuses. They're not fooling anybody anymore. And if you look at what's going on in the world, in certain key countries, the United States being one of them, of course, things are not getting better. And this is inexcusable because we have the power to pull ourselves up and out of this swamp that we have made a point to put ourselves in, or we have allowed the politicians to put us in there. Because we must remember at the end of the day, you as a voter, as a taxpayer, as a citizen, are directly and wholly responsible for the people you elect, or make a point not to elect. Now, I used to believe, and I've talked about before, the principle that if you don't participate in an election, you have no right to complain. Well, I'm going to tell you right now that I no longer believe that, okay? And let me explain why, and I think this is kind of logical. And if anybody can convince me otherwise, I'll be happy to change my opinion. I've never claimed to be anything omnipotent or all-knowing or all-powerful or whatever. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm happy to admit that. I don't have an ego in any views. I think I can defend my views. I think I do it passionately when I'm convinced that I know the truth. But at the end of the day, if somebody comes along and was able to disprove something that I believed, I'm actually grateful because I want to know the truth. I don't care what that truth is, but I want to know the truth, especially when we can obtain it. So if you look at what's going on, let's say that you don't participate in an election. You choose not to vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton because you don't want either as your leader, because you are tired of both political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, because you, like me, believe and know for a fact that these two parties are the only two parties who are directly and wholly responsible for all the problems we have today. It just depends on the issue, the topic, the subject. Sometimes they're both responsible. Sometimes they're only one party's responsible for only one issue. But the fact is these two parties have raked up $21 trillion in debt. And what have we got to show for it? Do we have wonderful superhighways that work and everyone's water is clean? Yeah, right. Just try telling that to the residents in Flint, Michigan. So for all this money, what have we got? We've got a divided country. That's the problem. And it was divided before this last election. Now, in my case, I think I have a bit of a unique view on this. Unique meaning it's uncommon. I guess unique wouldn't be the right word. It's an uncommon view. Most people who are Americans, I'm an American as well, of course, they lived in the United States. That's where they live. It's their country. But I left the United States in the year 2000. I moved to Europe, started journalism doing it over there. I was doing journalism, of course, years before in the U.S., since high school, decades actually. And what happened is there was a election that brought George W. Bush into power. And of course, Al Gore had won the popular vote, but he didn't end up in the White House. It was my view back then, and I talked about it in the media, that the United States was now a divided country. And I think that's kind of obvious because look at the logic here. If you have any nation, it doesn't matter what it is, and half the country votes for one leader and half the country doesn't support him, that's the very definition of being divided, isn't it? It's divided down the middle pretty much, 50-50. And then when George Bush was, the Iraq War happened and it blew up in his face, and his administration was nailed for lying about the war, which they did. They also told a lot of facts about it as well, which they don't get credit for, but they did lie about it. George Bush was reelected against an inept John Kerry, and I think it was better to have Bush in power than Kerry. But on the other hand, I wasn't enamored with the way Bush blew foreign policy. Because let's be blunt, there was a lot of goodwill and treasure after the terrorist attacks in 9/11. There were a lot of countries that were willing to help us that never even considered that before. George Bush blew that opportunity with both lips. Let's be blunt about it. So then you had the election of Barack Obama. And I'll never forget that because a friend of mine whom I've talked about before, his name is known to people who listen to this network, Bill Marriott. He was my webmaster. He's no longer with us, as in he died a few years ago, unfortunately, tragically. But I'll never forget when he asked me who I was going to vote for. I was living in Prague. He, of course, was living in the U.S. And I said, I'm not going to vote for anybody this time, Bill, because I don't want John McCain to be president. I don't want Barack Obama to be president. And he got really mad at me. He goes, why are you against Obama? I said very simply that here's a man who became a senator because his opponent basically dropped out of the race. And he's been in office for 2 years. He's told Harry Reid he's bored. Harry Reid tells him, well, why don't you run for president then? And believe it or not, that started the ball rolling. Well, I believe that if anybody gets elected to be senator of the United States and they're bored, quit, leave, be a man, show some balls. Don't sit there and complain that you're bored or that your job is hard or that woe is me. Get out, quit, resign. You can do that. You're going to have money anyway. So I told Bill Marriott that I'm not going to vote for Barack Obama because I don't think he's qualified. I want a better candidate than these two clowns. And so Bill got mad at me and he says, but don't you want to be part of history by electing the first black president? And I said, no, Bill. I said, the moment you consider his skin, I don't care who it is, that's racism. Well, then Bill said, no, it's not racism because we're electing a black guy. Oh, I see. The definition of racism is when you criticize or support black people. Well, I thought it applied to all people. If you criticize Jews, Polish, Italian, Native American Indians, whomever. If you criticize a race, hello, that is racism. So now I had a personal conflict with Bill, and I'm sharing all this for the first time. Bill was my webmaster. In fact, if it weren't for Bill, I probably wouldn't have ever started a website, would not have gotten on social media. So he called me one day and he says, Cal, you're, a bit famous and all that stuff. You need to really embrace this web thing, and I'm going to create a website for you and get you online and all that. And he did. He set up my first websites. Then he'd send me a mail or call me and say, go to this address, here you go. And he was, of course, a host provider with GoDaddy.com. And he set up my first site in WordPress. And then I quickly outgrew WordPress's feature set back then. So he switched me to Joomla. And I've loved Joomla ever since. Now other tools are used, tools developed by Israel, which are far better. But the point is, Bill set all that up. In fact, he even put some photos of me on the internet, which were photoshopped, which I told him I didn't appreciate, that he should clear those with me first, and don't do that. And one of them shows me in a so-called uniform behind an American flag, wearing a badge. That was Bill Marriott's photo. It was totally created. It was photoshopped. I had nothing to do with it. By the time it showed up on the net, it went viral. And, of course, it was used to attack me, even though I had nothing to do with it. But, of course, I expect to be attacked by people who are clueless. I'm used to it, in fact. So what happened is, as I started to publish my stuff every day, and I got into posting things on the web, I didn't have positive things to say about Barack Obama. Well, at that point, Bill got upset over time. And even though he couldn't disprove what I was saying, he said, well, I think I don't want to host your website anymore, even though we're friends. And I said, okay, no problem. I don't take it personally. And the politics was really getting to him because Obama was letting him down. And what happened was this. Bill Marriott came to Prague, and he came to visit me, and Barack Obama was visiting Prague as well. And this was his first speech abroad, where he talked about how the relationship with Russia had been reset, even though it was a lie. And we'll come back to that story in a moment and continue with some other stuff after this commercial break.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Kal's Corner Radio Show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. So getting back to the story about Bill Marriott and Obama and my involvement with Bill, he was one of my best friends over years. We worked at Apple Claris together, met when we were both hired at the same day. Anyway, he comes over to Prague, and Barack Obama is scheduled to visit Prague while he's there. And he said he was going to go up to Prague Castle to see the president, and he asked me to come along. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll be happy to go. I was going to cover Obama's appearance anyway. As a journalist, I was working for a newspaper. And what happened was that Obama comes to Prague, and he gives his speech. And what happened is we had been told that there were no tickets available, that we had to go there 24 hours ahead of time. Turns out that was a lie. It was just hype. There were plenty of tickets available. In fact, you didn't need any tickets. You could just show up on the castle grounds. It was ridiculous. So we went up to Prague Castle at about midnight, before the event happened. And we stayed there all night outside, and there's a lot of people there. And there were a lot of people from Germany and things like that. And in fact, most of them were from other countries. I don't think most of them were Czech, as I recall. The Czechs pretty much showed up during the day because they could just casually bop up to the castle, get in the crowd, and see him. So what happened is finally daylight has occurred, and in the meantime, I'd spent all night telling people about my different views on Obama. I talked to countless Obama supporters because everyone there loved him. There wasn't a single protester against him. And none of them could disprove anything I had said. I asked them one simple question, for example. What did Obama ever do to deserve to win a Nobel Prize? Well, the answer was nothing. And that was my point. So if everybody got a Nobel for what they potentially could do, then we'd all have a prize, wouldn't we? Instead, you should be rewarded for what you have done. And in the case of Obama, he had done nothing other than get elected. And getting elected to office does not mean you deserve to have a Nobel Prize. Anyway, so Obama gives his speech. And the thing that shocked me was not only its contents, but how I have two views of it. Either he knew he was lying, or he's arguably naive and delusional, and that's dangerous if you're president of the United States. I mean, here Hillary Clinton is the Secretary of State, and they talk about the Russians, and the relationship with Russia has now been reset, and they bring out this little red button as a prop gimmick, and of course they mistranslate it because they're very competent, right? Amazingly, out of many people who are assigned to the Russian wing of the State Department, they're fluent in Russian, but for some reason they couldn't translate reset properly. So when the Soviet ambassador, who's still in power, serving Putin, saw this, he explained that this was translated incorrectly, and of course it didn't mean reset, it meant something else. And I thought that was rather symbolic of Obama's debacle, of a real sign that he couldn't even handle basic foreign policy 101. They had a long way to learn. And he was very naive and idealistic, and of course, dealing with people who don't share those ideals or beliefs. We must remember that although certain governments out there talk about democracy and freedom, they don't really mean that. It's just empty words. We must remember that during the Cold War, East Germany was officially known as the German Democratic Republic, GDR. There wasn't anything democratic about it. It was a dictatorship. It was a communist government. North Korea likes to talk about people and democracy, but in their way. The leader of China, who's a dictator, has said he doesn't support Western democracy. You look at Russia's elections, they're not free and fair the way that they're more transparent and open and honest in the West. So Putin's version of democracy is a bit different than America's. And that's something that needs to be remembered at all times, because if I'm talking about black or white as a color, and you think it means blue or gray, we're never going to have the understanding that we should, and one of us is wrong. So I'm listening to this tripe, I just have to call it that, coming out of Obama's mouth. And I've never been one of these people who has fallen for Obama's speaking skills, and I'll tell you why. Because I see through them. When he takes his fist and, closes it and does the little fist pump, that's such a theatrical prop that I don't use it when I give speeches because it's not sincere. It's phony acting. I also don't like teleprompters. I believe, this is just my opinion, right or wrong, that if you don't know the subject, then don't talk about it. And although you can be wrong and you'll make mistakes, if you need a teleprompter to tell you what to say, then I argue that you really don't know what you're talking about. So I've never used a teleprompter or a script or anything like that in any speeches I've given. I remember one time when I was on my Roswell UFO crash, What They Don't Want You to Know book tour. Stanton Friedman was at part of that tour. He and I appeared together up in Portland, Oregon. And I was invited to give a lecture up at an appearance at the University of Portland, and I did. And what happened was there was no script. And so I just stood up there in front of the audience, spoke for a few minutes, and then I said, hey, rather than hear me talk, let's communicate together. Let's spend all the time we have here, however long it is, I don't care, and let's just talk. Let's do question and answer, Q&A back and forth. I want to hear from you. You can hear from me. Let's do this together. So for the next 3 hours, until they closed the room, literally, we talked. And it was great, and there was no script. There was no teleprompter. In all of my TV appearances, I've never used a script or a teleprompter. In fact, Robert Kiviat, who's a good longtime friend of mine and a well-known Fox producer, as well as for other networks like NBC and ABC, he's been around for decades. He always, on his specials, used to wait until the end of them to film me because my nickname was One Take Cal. I could just sit down, pound out the soundbite, cut, edit over. He would instead have me focus most of my time on doing research, going undercover, and so on. And that's why I would go to these countries, go undercover, find this data, expose whomever, come back, and then at the very end of the show, do my sound bites. And the way it would be edited would make it appear that it happened in a different order, but that's editing, Most people don't know this, but when TV series are filmed, they don't film them in the order, the scenes that they're presented in the show. They actually film them in entirely different orders, and then they're edited together to communicate a compelling story. And that's, again, you don't know that unless you do that for a living or are aware of it. So what happens is Obama became so predictable in his speech that I actually started doing an impression of him in the audience. And people were looking at me, and I even told them after they started laughing, here's what he's going to say next. And sure enough, Obama would say that because it was all canned BS shtick, let's be honest. And I'll never forget the reaction of the audience that day. Now, we're talking about thousands of people, most of them by this time are Czechs, in response to what Obama said. When he said that the relationship with Russia had now been reset, all of a sudden there was real quiet, and everyone's looking at each other like, what is he talking about? Because everybody there knew that this was not true. There was no reset. And just because you say something's been reset, doesn't automatically mean that it has been reset, okay? Because in order for the relations with Russia to be reset, it requires Russian cooperation. Duh, hello. And let's be honest, just before Obama came into power, relations between Russia and the U.S. had started to sour. And it started to sour over the issue of Georgia. That was a key thing that the media completely missed. People forget that in the last stretch of the Bush administration, the second term in office, there was a war that broke out between Georgia and Russia. Georgia stupidly attacked Russia. Russia, of course, beat their ass, and they took land away as compensation. And the U.S. was encouraging the expansion of NATO up to Russia's border and the absorption of Georgia as a member of NATO. And of course, Putin doesn't want that. Now, imagine if you are the president of Russia and you don't trust any other government or military. You certainly don't want a potential rival on your borders. This is why the geographic disposition of countries like Ukraine and Georgia are problematic, because right now they exist in kind of a neutral gray area in Europe. They're not firmly in the Russian camp, but they're not firmly in the Western camp either. And what happened is, after the Georgians were encouraged to try to join NATO and break away and join the EU, no, they didn't apparently tell anybody they were going to attack Russia, which again was a stupid thing to do. What happened was the EU, because they're cowards too often, then abandoned Georgia, left them hung out to dry. And of course, Bush, he was pretty much out to lunch by the end of his term. It seemed like he was waiting for the clock to expire on his watch. He didn't do anything either. And then Putin was humiliated at first when Georgia was successful in their first military attacks. And then, of course, Putin brought in the brunt of his military, or key parts of it, to squash them. And that's exactly what he did. So nobody believed for a moment when they left that speech by Obama that the relations had been reset at all. In fact, they were wondering, because I heard these comments, whether Obama had gotten back to smoking marijuana again, like he admitted he did it many years ago. And I'm not judging that. In fact, I have nothing wrong with people who smoke that. It's legal now in everything from Canada to many states in the U.S., certainly legal in Europe. But the point is, the mask was ripped off. People were disillusioned with Obama, and the Czechs especially saw through the nonsense because they understand the mentality of Russia. They were occupied brutally under its communism for years. Prior to that, they were occupied by Nazi Adolf Hitler, so they understand Russian brutality. Now, we're going to take a commercial break here real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll continue with this, and we'll segue into updates on the political assassination of Khashoggi by the Saudi government.
Watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, They conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Kal Korff. I'm your host, of course, and Rob McConnell is the executive producer of this show. So to wind up the Barack Obama, Bill Marriott stuff, Bill and I agreed to disagree about Obama. Later, in Obama's second term, Bill became disillusioned with Obama. He felt that he didn't really deliver hope and change like he had promised. And my reaction to Bill was, duh, no kidding. What did you expect? So what happened was that we agreed to disagree. One of the things that Bill said, and I had to stop him immediately on it, is he made the wrong assumption, at least where it concerns me. I have no idea about his interactions with others, that if I didn't support Obama, I must be a Republican, or I must mean I'm automatically supporting the other side. If I had a penny for every time somebody has dumped that nonsense on me, I'd have more money than Bill Gates right now. Just because I don't support something doesn't mean I'm automatically for another candidate, okay? It doesn't work that way. I've been very clear in my case who I support and who I don't. And I've never been a my party right or wrong type guy. I've never been a my country right or wrong type guy. I like to take each politician and each issue on their own merits or lack of and render an opinion accordingly. So although Bill and I would agree to disagree, for example, it bothered him over what the U.S. was doing concerning how they were handling certain terrorists. Well, since I was involved in counterintelligence at that time, was an analyst, wrote many reports on the issue of terrorism, turned over information about Iran's nuclear program to various governments, etc. This is all a matter of public record. It's only disputed if you believe UFO conspiracy nonsense out there. I had to set him straight on that, and I sent him chapters from some of my work, including a breakdown, one key graph that I had made showing that there were the different levels of terrorism. Bill had made the mistake, unfortunately, like most people, of believing that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And that has never been true. As I've explained many times, because it is a fact, and I've written about this extensively over the years as a journalist and author, terrorism, the very definition of it, is the systematic and deliberate targeting of innocent civilians for the purposes of political or social gain or change. Okay? So, for example, somebody might blow up a bank trying to protest the monetary policies of a government. They kill innocent people. That bank is a private bank. That is an act of terrorism. On the other hand, if a rebellion breaks out and people are rising up to overthrow their government for whatever reason, and they make a point to attack only government institutions, that is not a terrorist attack, okay? So what distinguishes acts of terrorism from acts of revolution or so-called freedom fighting is when you make a point to deliberately target innocent civilians. And what Bill had fallen victim to, like many people, is when terrorist groups like Hamas say they are the resistance or the freedom fighters. Well, of course they use those terms to describe themselves that way because it's much better for their marketing than saying, we're terrorists, we love it. So, because the terrorism angle doesn't work as far as marketing goes and your image and getting media attention and sympathy, you claim you're oppressed, you're the resistance, you're freedom fighters, your movement, etc. And that's, of course, the sick game that terrorist groups like Hamas do play. So once Bill understood all of these nuances, we agreed to disagree about certain things, but we remained the best of friends to the point where I was literally the last human being on this earth to speak to him before he died. In fact, he called me before he died. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because we agreed to disagree. And the America that I grew up in was largely that way. I remember very vividly as a young kid, starting to lecture and teach when I was age 13, talking about UFOs, paranormal, space-related exploration topics, science, things like that, I would get a lot of pushback. I would talk to people, engage them, debate them. I was head of the debate team in JFK High School. Never have lost a debate in my life. I have one simple rule about debating. If you can't defend your subject, or you really don't know it or can't prove it, don't bother debating it. There's nothing wrong with admitting you're wrong or you just don't know. In fact, if you don't know, what you should do is immediately say, I want to know. Okay? And I'm fascinated by everything I don't know. I've always been a why person. And then I want to know the why of the why of the why. And I remember as a young boy, my father would just say, it just is, son. He'd get frustrated because I'd keep asking why, and at some point he didn't know. And I would be unhappy with that. I'd try to go find out myself, and then he'd just tell me that. But yet when I look at America today, as well as other parts of the world, and social media is both a blessing and a curse where it concerns what is happening, people are no longer agreeing to disagree anymore. They're starting to engage in hatred and intolerance. They're advocating violence, and that is never acceptable. It is a fact that the founding fathers of the United States basically said that if the government fails to provide you life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that it is your constitutional duty to rise up and overthrow it. Yes, it is. If the government is not doing the job that the people elect it to do, you absolutely must change the government. But the way you do that is through the ballot box. You don't do that by bullets. Those days are over. You do it by voting, and you do it fair. You vote for who you think is the best. And people will say, well, that didn't work this last couple of times, Cal, because, Hillary Clinton won more votes than Donald Trump, the popular vote, but she still didn't win the White House, even though most people voted for her. Well, first of all, we don't know exactly by how many votes Hillary Clinton really did win, because nobody's bothered to go back and check all the votes that were certified. They haven't, okay? So until we know exactly the real number, don't lie and say we know the real number, because we don't. What we can say is that Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote. Seems to be true. But by how much, we don't know. All I know is if you go to the internet and you Google the electoral map and the voting map of the United States, you will see two colors, red and blue. Please go to the internet and look at this map. It's been around since the election. And you will see that other than a few areas of the U.S., which is California, New York, pretty much the rest of the country was red. That's not Hillary Clinton's color. Hillary Clinton's color is blue for Democrats, red is for Republican. And for those who complain that Hillary Clinton was so loved and so popular and just was screwed out of her election victory, I'm sorry, you're talking out your ass. You're ignorant, and let me prove it. First of all, we don't have direct vote for president. We have the Electoral College, okay? Well, it doesn't matter how many popular votes she got. What matters is how many Electoral College votes she got. The other issue is irrelevant. So the moment anybody goes there, stop them, because they're wasting their time and especially yours, because it's nonsense. If our system doesn't support something and it's not part of it, then it's illogical to argue about that part that doesn't exist. So until we don't have the Electoral College, the popular vote doesn't matter. And now, all of a sudden, the Democrats are saying, let's get rid of the Electoral College. Well, see, this is the weird thing about Democrats. Actually, it's not weird, it's predictable. They love the Electoral College when it goes in their favor. They hate it when they come on the short end of it, and that's happened at least twice so far. Al Gore and then Hillary Clinton. Well, if everyone loved Obama to the degree that Bill Marriott did at first, in his first term, not the second term, Hillary Clinton would be the president of the United States today. But she wasn't. In fact, Obama's greatest legacy, as far as I'm concerned, is Donald Trump. The reason Trump is in the White House is because of what Obama failed to do. Not because of what he did. It's what he failed to do. And I told Bill many years ago that this hope and change slogan was nonsense. It was simple, dumbed down phraseology for people to be easily fooled. I said he's not going to bring in hope and change. He's not going to bring in really any real significant change. In fact, it's going to be more chump change. That's the term I used. And I remember doing shows with Rob McConnell from Europe and Prague talking about this is more proverbial chump change. I used that term, and it proved to be exactly that. And it has to do with one overall issue of logic here. And again, it's common sense. Both political parties are responsible for the problems we have. There have been no other political parties in power. So do you think for a moment that they're suddenly going to reform themselves and suddenly say, hey, we actually want to help the middle class grow, and we're going to turn down big money and lobbyists? No, they're not going to do that, folks, because once they're feeding at the trough, they're set for life. And if you put these people in power and they screw you, whose fault is that? It's your fault. If you vote for the wrong person and you end up in trouble because you voted for that person and he won the office and now he's hurting you, whose fault is it? It's your fault. Just like if you're the boss of a company and you hire the wrong person, it's ultimately your fault. So I no longer believe that if you boycott an election, that you're no longer a patriot or you're no longer worthy of having a voice in society. If anything, you have cast your voice. You have said, I have higher standards. I insist that we do better. And because I'm not going to compromise on that, I'm not going to vote for these two clowns. I'm not going to further the status quo, which is harming this nation instead of healing it, which is harming the American people instead of helping them and empowering them to achieve their true potential. That's why I view that way, or view things that way now. So let's take another commercial break real quick, and then when we come back, I'll give you an update on communist China and the political assassination of Mr. Khashoggi.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on the Kal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and Rob McConnell's the executive producer. So to wrap this up, because time always goes by really fast when I do this show, at least in my mind, again, one of my best friends ever in my life, Bill Marriott, he was a hardcore Obama fan, became disillusioned with Obama. We've always agreed to disagree about many politics. And the point is, we stayed best friends. And I was literally the last person to talk to him before he died. And I keep thinking about that because when I see my fellow Americans today, and of course I talk to them all the time, former teachers, longtime friends for many years, new people I met through social media and Facebook, I see Americans not agreeing to disagree. Some of them are advocating violence. Briefly, you have the hypocrisy of the left. You know, at first the left used to claim they had the higher moral ground because they'd hold up imagery and cite incidents of where racist white right-wing extremists would go ahead and commit acts of violence. But yet the left has started to do this. But yet the left isn't condemning the left's own violence. And then when you confront them on it, they'll say, oh, that's not really the left. That's just an exception, an aberration, a small group of it. No, it's not. Okay, it's not. So the left is not being honest about what the left is doing or what it has become. When you go ahead and harass people, that's wrong. Okay, and I know from firsthand experience what that is like. I've been cyberstalked for years. The police have that information. I've got dozens of death threats over the years. This is not the way to behave. And I've never done anything wrong to deserve a single death threat. I'm just not that important. And I don't do anything to deserve it. But yet I've got them. Just because I happen to say in one example that I remember one death threat, I mentioned that Mother Teresa wasn't a saint, that there were some issues with her. And I cited a expose of her by Penn and Teller on their show Bullshit. And it was a top-rated show. They also exposed some things about Mahatma Gandhi. And their point was he wasn't a holy man. He was just a human being. He wasn't Mahatma anything. He's just Gandhi. And having lived in India for many years, I saw the wrath of the Gandhians myself. I remember I was not allowed to write an article pointing out that Gandhi had written some very affectionate, essentially love letters to a man. Does that prove Gandhi was gay? No. It just proves, in Gandhi's own words, that he had deep feelings for this guy. Gandhi did have some sexual issues. He would sleep naked with relatives. That's kind of wrong. But you can't go there in India. You can't criticize him because he's the Mahatma. No, he's not. He's just Gandhi. But that's the way Indian law is, and I can't do anything about that. I can only tell you, having been the recipient of it firsthand, that that's the way things fly over there, for right or wrong, and I believe it's wrong. Especially when those love letters are in, and letters to Hitler that Gandhi wrote, which were positive, are in Gandhi's museum in Delhi. You can go read them. So go figure. Now, what's happening today is you have an election coming up, and the Democrats are projected to retake the House of Representatives, what we call Congress. The Republicans are expected to hold the Senate, maybe even increase their power in the Senate by a couple of seats. Now, let's say that the prediction that the Democrats are going to get into power in the Congress is true. Well, as I said many years ago, it just means the prediction I made was right, and that is that I said that the Democrats are so specially talented that they've become the weakest since the time of the Civil War, and that they once held all levers of power, but after the first 2 years of Obama's term in office, they lost their supermajority. Then they lose the Senate, then they lose the White House. They've lost everything. They've lost most of the governorships because they have special talent. They're Dumbocrats many times, and I often compare them to the Keystone Cops without trying to insult the Keystone Cops. Now, if we end up with a Democratic victory in Congress, we have a divided government again, which means the Democrats will do one thing and the Senate will do the opposite. And the result is nothing will get done. And then the Democrats will blame Trump, which is stupid because Trump doesn't have anything to do with that. He's waiting for legislation to be passed so he can sign, but he can't write the legislation. He can only sign it. The Congress and the Senate must write it and approve it, and he signs it. That's the way the process works. So I'm not looking forward to divided government. And I'll tell you that I'm not going to vote in this election either. And that's painful for me to say that, because I cannot support the Democrats and I cannot support the Republicans. I just can't do it. So I'm not going to vote for either in this election. I'm going to sit this one out. I will probably vote in the next election because I think that if we end up with a divided government, things are going to become even more interesting, even more polarized, even more divisive. There will be more acts of violence and intolerance and hatred. Things will get worse. And then I plan to jump in and see where I can help. Right now, I need to see where everything's going to line up, and I will have that answer in a couple of weeks when the results come out. And then I will absolutely be very busy. I've always been very busy politically anyway, but just not overtly or upfront, more covertly. And I have a lot of back channel messages to a lot of people, very different from some of the stuff that you see in the public, and it's good to have those backdoor communications. So I do know people in the Democratic Party. I know people who know where the Clinton bodies are buried per se. I know people on the Republican side of things, some of the liberals and progressives. Again, I'm active politically, but just not up front, but I intend to change that going forward after the results of the new election, using the power of the media and journalism to try to get people to understand issues, try to bring them together, try to get them to unite and move things forward, and try to make whatever positive difference that I can contribute in my own little way. Now, before we end this show, let me give you a couple of quick updates. As you know, we relaunched this radio show a little over a year ago from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates is a neighboring country of Saudi Arabia, a country I often call Saudi Wahhabia. When I was in the UAE for the last couple of years off and on, this is before the show was relaunched, I went ahead and heard, of course, and got firsthand information about reforms that were attempted in Saudi Arabia and how Saudi Arabia was going to remake itself more in the lines of the United Arab Emirates, allow women to drive, they didn't have to cover themselves, men and women could mix freely in society, etc. Basic things that the Saudis should always have allowed, but too many Muslim countries don't allow because that's the way they roll, and I believe it's wrong. Look at Iran. They kill homosexuals. That's wrong. They force women to cover themselves. That's wrong. But that's the way they are, and I don't support that, and I can't wait for those countries to be truly free and democratic. But when I look at the murder of Khashoggi by the Saudi government, I cannot help but believe that the government itself was involved. The evidence seems to point that way. And I can no longer support the reform efforts of this government. In fact, I have never supported family hierarchy monarchies. I don't support dictatorships. I believe in freedom and democracy. I believe that the people have the right to choose their leader. And through that process, everyone collectively determines their future and fate. So I can't support this anymore. I want Saudi Arabia to change and reform. I do want them to be a bulwark against Iran, but both countries need to change, and it's time for their systems to go. And in closing on this show, I want to say that it's not just those countries. What is killing our species today is our collective stupidity and our refusal deliberately to ruthlessly enforce a universal code of conduct. Look at the crime of murder. It is a crime in most countries. If you commit murder, you get caught, you go to jail, you go to prison, you get prosecuted. It's one of the universal principles that we try to adhere to. But yet, having been in 27 different countries, I can tell you from firsthand observation that there have been some murders that I'm aware of that went down in some of those countries, even in India, where the guilty wouldn't be touched, okay? They wouldn't touch them. So when the crime of murder is not prosecuted as it should be, in the case of Khashoggi here, where the government, the leader himself, the crown prince himself, may have ordered his death, which makes it a political killing, that's wrong. This journalist did nothing to deserve to be killed. And when the world doesn't condemn communist China for its massive concentration camps spread out over an area that is roughly half the size of India, that's wrong. And what is the UN doing about this? Nothing, because the UN is broken. If the UN were to try to punish China for its human rights abuses and it went to the Security Council, guess what would happen? China would veto it, and then nothing could get done because the UN doesn't work anymore. The Cold War is over, and it still operates in a Cold War mentality framework, and it doesn't work anymore. Okay? Its day is over. So I don't blame the U.S. for pulling out of the Human Rights Council at the UN because it's a joke. It's a fraud. When you put countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia in charge of human rights, then that means you don't value human rights at all. You're a hypocrite. Shut up, get out of power. You don't deserve the office you hold, especially being at the UN. So I see a reckoning coming globally because things cannot continue the way they are. And how do you stop a country that's a nuclear power from violating human rights? How do you change Saudi Arabia? How do you change Iran? How do you change so-called communist China? How do you keep it from invading Taiwan, etc.? These are challenges we're all going to have to face because let's say we do nothing, things will only get worse. The only chance we have as a species, as a race going forward, is to do something. And we have to do it now. In fact, we should have been doing it all along. So it literally is now or never. If it's never, we're doomed. If it's now, we have perhaps a slight chance to succeed. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back next week.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.